The Supreme Court just dismantled Donald Trump's most powerful economic weapon. In a 6-3 ruling, the highest court in America declared that the president never had the legal authority to impose his sweeping tariffs. Tariffs that drained over $130 billion from businesses, raised prices on everything from groceries to car parts, and turned the entire global trade system into a hostage negotiation. And for Canada, this changes everything. If this kind of analysis matters to you, subscribe and hit the like button. Let's break this down. On Friday, February 20th, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to impose tariffs was unconstitutional. The law was designed for sanctions, for freezing enemy assets, for national emergencies. It was never meant to tax imports. The word tariff does not appear in it, not once. And yet, Trump used it to slap 25% duties on Canada, 35% later, up to 145% on China, and sweeping levies on nearly every country on earth. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, was unambiguous. When Congress grants the power to impose tariffs, it does so clearly and with careful constraints. It did neither here. Two of the justices who voted against Trump, Gorsuch and Barrett, were his own appointees. This was not a partisan ruling. This was the Constitution drawing a line. Trump's response was immediate and revealing.
Less than 24 hours after imposing a new 10% global tariff, President Trump has announced on Truth Social he's boosting that levy to 15%. The president's move is in response to the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling Friday, rejecting his sweeping tariffs. But National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett says Trump was prepared for this outcome.
President Trump told us from the beginning that we had to have a backup plan and a backup plan for the backup plan in case the Supreme Court ruled against his first try of doing it with IEEPA. And so isn't it wonderful to think about how well organized he is, that the same day that we get the Supreme Court ruling, we come out with a backup plan that's just as good.
Let's be clear about what just happened. The Supreme Court told the president his tariffs were illegal, and within hours, he imposed new ones. Not because he had a strategy, because he had no other move. The so-called backup plan is not a plan. It is a downgrade. Trump went from 35% on Canada under IEEPA to 15% under Section 122 of the Trade Act. That is not strength. That is a retreat dressed up in a press conference. And here is the part Kevin Hassett did not mention. Section 122 has a built-in expiration, 150 days. After that, the president needs Congress to extend it. The same Congress where just 1 week earlier, the House of Representatives voted 219 to 211 to override Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans crossed the aisle. Trump threatened them with primary consequences. They voted against him anyway, not loyalty, erosion. But the legal defeat is only half the story. The financial fallout is just beginning.
Thousands of companies, meantime, have already sued or are getting ready to sue the Trump administration to get refunds for tariffs. But there's still a lot of uncertainty over how this will all shake out economically. Archie Hall's an economics editor at The Economist.
Whether that's done in a smooth and straightforward way, and lots of folks have said there should be a way for this to be done automatically, or whether it involves a huge amount of paperwork and the government tries to make it as hard as possible so they can cling on to those tariff revenues, that remains to be seen.
The federal government could be on the hook for about $170 billion, with major retailers like Costco down to small businesses lining up to get their money back. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said yesterday this process could take months or even years to play out in courts.
$70 billion. That is the minimum estimate of what the federal government now owes to businesses, from Costco to small importers, who paid tariffs that the Supreme Court has now declared illegal. Treasury Secretary Bessent says the refund process could take months, possibly years, and you can guarantee the administration will fight every single dollar, because admitting you owe $70 billion means admitting you collected $70 billion illegally. This is not an accounting problem. It is a political catastrophe wrapped in a legal time bomb, and economists are warning that the worst may still be ahead.
Economists are also worrying this could be piling on to a financial problem the Supreme Court just rejected. Diane Swank is chief economist at KPMG.
There's a downside to this in that the new kinds of tariffs that the president can use are not easily turned on and off. And the off part is the important part, is that we're not going to be able to, once they go through the investigations, those ones to replace the ones that were ruled illegal by the Supreme Court are going to be much harder to reverse once they go into place.
This is the detail that most people will miss. The IEEPA tariffs were fast and illegal. The replacements Trump is now pursuing through Section 232, Section 301, and other trade laws are slower. They require investigations and formal processes, but once they are locked in, they are far more difficult to remove. Diane Swank at KPMG put it plainly: the off switch is the problem. Trump is not retreating from tariffs. He is switching from a weapon the courts can strike down to weapons the courts cannot easily touch. That is not a defeat. That is an adaptation, and Canada needs to understand this clearly. Now, what does this mean for Canada specifically? The immediate impact is positive. Under the old IEEPA framework, non-CUSMA Canadian goods faced a 35% tariff. That is now gone. Under the new Section 122 tariff, CUSMA-compliant Canadian goods are exempt, and since the majority of Canada-US trade falls under CUSMA, the effective tariff burden on Canada just dropped significantly. The S&P TSX Composite hit a record high on Friday, 33,817, as markets priced in the relief. But this is a tactical victory, not a strategic one. Steel, aluminum, lumber, automobiles, copper, these are still under Section 232 tariffs, and those were not touched by the Supreme Court ruling. These tariffs remain. They continue to hurt Canadian workers, Canadian manufacturers, Canadian exporters. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called the ruling a step in the right direction, but added that unless steel, aluminum, lumber, and auto tariffs are lifted in the CUSMA review, Canadian workers will continue to suffer. He is right. The headline says Canada won. The fine print says the most painful tariffs are still in place, and the political dynamics in Washington are shifting, but not fast enough to celebrate. The House vote against Trump's Canada tariffs was historic, the first bipartisan rebuke of his signature economic policy. 6 Republicans broke ranks. Trump immediately attacked them, warning of serious consequences at election time. But here is what matters. Even within his own party, the consensus on tariffs is cracking. Former Foreign Affairs Minister Peter MacKay called the Supreme Court ruling a major blow, coming at a time of growing resistance inside the Republican Party. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce warned that Canada should prepare for new, blunter mechanisms of trade pressure. Bloomberg called it a volatile new phase. This is the reality. The Supreme Court did not end the trade war. It changed the battlefield. Trump lost his fastest weapon, emergency powers. He replaced it with a weaker, temporary tool that expires in 5 months. He faces $70 billion in refund claims. His own Congress voted against him. His own Supreme Court appointees ruled against him. And his economic team is calling this a success. But Canada is not out of danger. The Section 232 tariffs remain. The CUSMA review is approaching, and Trump will use it as leverage. New investigations under Section 301 could target Canadian industries within months, and the 15% global tariff, even if temporary, signals that this administration will use any legal mechanism available to maintain trade pressure. So, what does Canada do? Canada does what it has been doing. It strengthens CUSMA compliance. It diversifies trade, the China deal, the EU partnerships, the Indo-Pacific strategy. It invests in domestic manufacturing so that Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian products are built for Canadian consumers, not just for American buyers. And it prepares not for the end of the trade war, but for the next phase. The Supreme Court took away Trump's hammer, but the toolbox is still full. And Canada's best defense is not hoping for another court ruling. It is building an economy that does not depend on one. Canada is not reacting to events. It is shaping them. It is not waiting for permission. It is building leverage. And that, not any single court ruling, is what will define the next chapter. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe, like, and share. This is Canada Today. We do not just report the news. We explain what it means.